if you can do that in jeans and a tank top, go get them, Tiger, right? Like, I don't care. And as that kind of went through our culture and created our vibe, like we celebrated people being themselves that again, they didn't have to think, right, about what they wore. They weren't trying to impress anybody. They were just coming to work to get their shit done. And they didn't have to think about anything, right? They could be themselves.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Kristi. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. Today, I'm excited to have a guest whose career has been a testament to turning challenges into game-changing opportunities. Mark McFatridge. With a proven track record of leadership excellence, Mark's journey began with a bold mission to turn around the least performing banking region of a national bank, miles away from his comfort zone. Against the odds, he not only revitalized the region, but inspired his team to embrace a new spirit of achievement. Mark's relentless pursuit of excellence didn't stop there. In 2021, after he retired from banking, he founded Quade, an innovative network of high-performing CEOs committed to redefining leadership. Through collaboration, authenticity, and diverse perspectives, Quade aims to empower leaders to achieve personal and professional growth, all while making a positive impact on their organizations and communities. Get ready to be inspired as we dive into today's episode of Vibecast. All right, Mark. Well, I'm grateful to have you today, and I thank you for taking the time to talk with me and talk about all the cool things that you're doing and kind of how you got there. So, as I do with all my guests, I'd like you first to kind of start out explaining to me how you define a vibe.
Yeah, Kristi, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. For me, vibe, it's something that you feel immediately upon walking into a room. And it could be a work environment, it could be a bar, it could be a, living room or a social gathering of some sort. But you know it when you feel it. And it's just like, I know what's going on here. And the vibe could be really excitable, it could be dull, it could be whatever, but as soon as you feel it, you know it and what it is.
Yeah, it's like the energy, right?
Yeah, it's definitely an energy.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so interesting because that isn't unlike how other people have defined it, but it's like, so how do you create it? Becomes the next question, right? Which I think we're going to get into as we talk through this podcast. And I think that that comes out in kind of some of the actions that are taken or some of like the maybe physical attributes of a company or emotional, spiritual, whatever it is of an organization that actually create the vibe. Because you walk into Starbucks and there's intentionality about where they product placement and how it smells and or Chick-fil-A, right? That's another example, like the word choice that they use, like it's all in kind of how they do it that creates it, but you can't necessarily articulate what it is other than like good or bad to some degree, right? When you walk into a place.
I think from a business standpoint, I think it's got to go along with your entire company vision, right? Who do you want to be when you grow up? Who are the type of people that you're trying to serve? What's the personality of the CEO and the leader and the leadership group? And I think once you identify those things and you become true to it, and I use the phrase unapologetically authentic.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, and so once you're able to do that, that the vibe just kind of takes care of itself, right? Like, so my formal career has been in banking, right?
Yeah, let's get to that, with your career, because I love this idea of unapologetically authentic, but when you and I first spoke, you kind of articulated to me how you got there. So I'd love to start to hear, you share that a little bit with the listeners.
Yeah, yeah. So started out as in public accounting because I was an accounting major at Butler University in Indianapolis, and hated it from day one, and got into banking. And banking provided me just an amazing career and a bunch of opportunities. And so in 2006, I had my first opportunity to be a bank president, and it was we relocated from Indianapolis, Indiana, to Springfield, Missouri, and I led all the community banks for Regions Bank in Missouri and Western Kentucky, and I inherited the worst performing banking group in the entire company. And in Springfield specifically, our bank was had a reputation as they called us the Velcro Bank because we had changed names so much that they said it would have been better if you would have just put the signs up in Velcro. It'd be easier to take them off. Swear to God, I'm not making that up. So we almost had no reputation, and so we had to figure out who we could be and who we could serve and who we could do that the best for to help differentiate ourselves. And I'm a very, I am who I am, right? It's just who I was. And I know I don't fail and I work my ass off. And, that's the type of vibe that we wanted to have within our organization. And we're going to have fun, but we're going to work hard and we're going to be in front of the people that we want to do. And so we focused immediately on culture, and we didn't pretend to be anything other than who we were. We were a big bank, right? A big national bank in that market of a lot of community banks. And some of my predecessors wanted to shy away from that. And I leaned into it because we could do things that other banks could not do. We could lend more money than other banks in the market. We had products and services that other banks could not provide. And so instead of running away from it and be ashamed of it, we leaned into it and kind of wore that on our sleeve. So we created that vibe.
And is that what you would attribute to like it failing and failing again? And maybe failing is like a strong word to use, but like not working and having to change the name. And then, what attributed to this kind of Velcro bank because they weren't leaning into like the authenticity of what the bank actually was and hoping to be something else. And then the leaders actually were leaning into that for themselves too. Is that generally speaking like what happened?
Yeah, generally, this was back in the day when a ton of bank mergers were happening, and so a lot of it was just timing and how they got caught up into it, and it wouldn't have mattered whether they were high performing or low performing. The overall bigger bank was being acquired, and that's what happened a bunch of times. But when you start comparing, one of the reasons we were one of the worst performing banking groups before I got there was we didn't believe in ourselves. We didn't have swagger. We didn't own who we were. We didn't, right? We were trying to compete with everybody else instead of saying, screw that. We're gonna bank over here, right? We're gonna identify the companies that we can bank and go after those and be unapologetic about that. And that helped us. And really, what that boiled down to, forget about the actual strategy, but what it boiled down to was we picked out a vision of who we wanted to be and we went after it. And that, to me, that's the first thing you've got to do before you create a vibe or a culture.
And was there like a defining moment in your career or with that in that particular bank where you knew that that's what had to be? And then how did you rally people around that idea? Because I'm sure there was some skepticism at first, right? If they had been there for a long time or they had a different idea about what the identity of the bank should be. Like talk to me through like specifics if you will of like how that kind of unfolded.
Yeah. Well, so the beauty of taking over a turnaround project, right, is anybody that's been there for a long time can't go, this is the way we've always done it. It's been successful, right? I mean, so
True,
you're
true.
going to have a new idea. So people always are like, oh man, turnaround's got to be hard. I'm like, they're not that hard because there's so much you can't go down any further, right? So really, just again, for me, it's let's identify where we can be successful and then go after that, right? Let's not try to be everything to everybody, but the people that we can be everything to, let's be all about them and figure that out and talk their language and provide their products and be where they are and all that kind of stuff. And once you simplify things, like one of my qualities is I'm a simplifier, right? Like I'm not very bright, so I've got to take these big things and boil it down to where I can understand it. And I've gotten really good at that over my life and my career of this stuff is not that hard, right? Like, let's figure out who we can be everything to and go do that.
Gosh, that's like a really great just
tactic in general, right? Because we in this world have overcomplicated so many things to the point where we like can never make a decision on something because there's like always another piece to analyze or consider or think about versus just saying like what are we actually trying to get after and what's the simple end goal to all of this. And maybe it's like to increase the revenue, maybe it's to really understand who our customer is. Maybe it's both. Maybe but like if we step back to think about what we're in it for, it really isn't that complicated. We've just made it that way.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think there's always room to expand, but I think before you expand, right, you can literally do anything, right? There are so many options out there, but if you want to be good and create scale and create success, you've got to be really good at one thing first. Whatever that one thing is, you've got to be really good at it. And once you get really good at it and you start building some market share, then you can go, I'll tell you what, let's add this one. And now you get really good at that. And then you go, let's add this one. And you get really good at that. And then all of a sudden, over time, you look at it and you're like, holy shit, we have done some good stuff and we've grown and scaled. And we just did it, seemingly very methodically and did it the right way. But to me, it's got to start with a core of it could be a customer base, it could be a product, it could be a service, it could be whatever. But you've got to be really good at that one thing first before you add anything else.
For sure, for sure. Okay, let's go back to this idea of unapologetically authentic, which is a very hard word to say when you
It
um,
is.
you had shared with me when we first spoke about how maybe that wasn't your tune or your image when you first got into banking, right? Because there was maybe this perception that you had to be a certain way or wear the tie or whatever it was, right? And then one day, and I'm sure it was a series of days or months or years, whatever it was, you kind of turned around and said, "This isn't working for me." Can you talk to me a little bit about like what made you come to that realization and like why you were one way and then the pivot to another?
Yeah, so early in my professional career, I worked for Fifth Third Bank. Fifth Third at the time, especially, was a very traditional bank, and so literally navy blue suits, white shirt, and a conservative tie. Black suit, maybe gray if it was crazy, right? But so it was just who you are, right? And you followed it. That was the vibe of that bank here, and nothing wrong with it. And so you did that, and I do remember one time, like I bought an olive suit and wore a light blue shirt and a red tie. And it was like, I look good. I'm not gonna lie. But I walked in the office and people are like, I may as well have been naked. Like, they're like, what are you doing? Right. And I'm like, all right, maybe there's a, so, ultimately I moved on and went to another bank, Union Planners, which became Regions. And that's when I got moved out to Springfield, Missouri. And my wife will tell you, and it was a big joke. Like, this is my first bank president role. And, I'm in a community that I don't know anybody. And so like on Saturdays, if we were going grocery shopping, like, I mean, I wouldn't wear a suit grocery shopping, but I would make sure that I showered and I'd look presentable, right? And so I just kept thinking that, and I'm like, ultimately, I got to know the people in the community, and I'm like, this is stupid. And I've never liked wearing a tie. I've literally never liked wearing it. And so one day I'm like, I'm not going to wear a tie, and that's it. And so it actually happened in 2008. I haven't worn a tie since 2008, except my son's wedding, because my daughter-in-law made me. So I'm not kidding. It's 2020.
That seems to be a very defining moment in your life of the day you left the tie behind.
Yes, yes, for sure. But so what I discovered was when I didn't have to think about that type of stuff, and I still dressed nice, right? I still, wore appropriate and professional and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't wear ties. But what I figured out was it relieved me of thinking, right? Like, I didn't have to think about what tie went with what I was wearing that day. I just wore what I wore and I was more comfortable and whatever. And so we just started doing more of that. And so ultimately I left that bank, still stayed in Springfield, but went to another bank, and I took over, it was another turnaround project. And I walked in one day and they had two commercial leaders who led the commercial banking team, and they were both wearing ties. And I walked in and I wasn't wearing a tie, and they're like, "Oh, do we not have to wear ties anymore?" I go, "Look, I don't care if you wear a tie or not. Here's what I need. I need more loans. I need more deposits. I need, more fees. I go, if you can do that in jeans and a tank top, go get them, Tiger, right? Like, I don't care. And as that kind of went through our culture and created our vibe, like, we celebrated people being themselves, that again, they didn't have to think, right, about what they wore. They weren't trying to impress anybody. They were just coming to work to get their shit done, and they didn't have to think about anything, right? They could be themselves. And that's where that unapologetically authentic piece started to come about. And, what we saw was, if you freed people up to be themselves, they were more productive, they were happier, they told people about our culture and our vibe, and we became an employer of choice. And it seems silly to say it was because we didn't wear ties, but I mean, there was something to that.
Yeah, yeah. And how did that have an impact on your customer base? Because, you were all very, for the most part, very visible to the clients that you served, right? So some organizations are more office based where they're not interacting, maybe their sales forces, but you guys were visibly interacting with your client base. So like what was the impact there?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to what we talked about almost at the beginning, was we knew who our client base was, right? And these were, I mean, Springfield's a decent sized town, but I mean, these were salt of the earth people, right? Like blue collar type folks. So, it was almost intimidating if they came into a bank and a banker's wearing ties. So when we started ditching ties and, even wearing jeans before it was casual Friday or whatever, like, really it was, be where your customers are, right? And if your customers are jean wearing people, wear jeans. If they're suit and tie people, wear suit and tie. But it's kind of meet those people where you are. So we defined who our clients were, and we set about to serve them, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's amazing. And then what else happened from that? So, yes, you became the employer of choice, but like what else did you see people doing or acting or innovating or creating from allowing them to be themselves?
Yeah. Well, so the second bank that we took over, there was a turnaround bank. Again, they were poor performing, but they had an amazing history and previously had a really good culture and all this kind of stuff. But they had been beaten down by the regulators and the economy and the whatever. And so we created what we called a pride, passion, and culture team. So PPC, where we brought together 20 employees from every level of the bank, from tellers to our CFO to commercial lenders to operations folks, right? And these 20 people came together to focus on the improvement of the bank. And the improvement was broken down into like 9 areas: culture, communication, recruiting and onboarding, all these things. And these 20 people led the 9 initiatives, and they started getting the rest of our company involved. And it became like, we literally had a draft because this became so powerful and so instrumental in turning us around. We actually had a draft of people to serve on these committees because literally everybody wanted to be on these committees. It was
That's so
amazing. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life, and it became who we were. Like, we did some stuff, man. And like, the second year in, it was the first year that American Banker had best banks to work for in the United States. And I swear to you, I wanted to measure our culture somehow, and they did a survey of all your company employees, and I just wanted to see where we were, and it was free basically, and so I'm cheap. So we signed up for it, and we got the results back, and we were one of the top 35 banks in the United States to work for. This little bank in Springfield, Missouri, was one of the top 35 banks to work for in the United States, and it was all about company culture, and it's how we did things, how we went about things, how we communicated, how little everything. And so yeah, we ended up winning that 2 out of 3 years.
wow. Very cool. You know what I love about that too is like so often, so, I have an HR consulting company and so often it's like, well, it's like HR's responsibility to build culture, or that's what some organizations say, like, it sits in HR, right? And the cool thing about that is, like, it didn't sit anywhere. Maybe HR could help facilitate the conversation because that's the skills that they have that they bring to the table. But if you're bringing everyone from different levels and different parts of the business, then it becomes everybody's responsibility, which I ultimately think that that is the case. And the leaders hold a a lot of weight in carrying out the culture because they create the environment for their staff. And so that's really cool and like a way to get it rolling. I'd also be curious like how you got people so excited about being on that committee because so many times I hear like, oh, another committee. It's just like another responsibility I don't have time for. And I mean, I more times than not, I don't know that I've ever heard somebody like super excited to be on like a committee that they've volunteered for or been voluntold to do. So what was the secret sauce in getting people kind of excited for that?
Yeah. So two things. So one of the things that we said, I sat on the committee, but I was just one of 20 members, and like literally we left titles at the door. So again, I got outvoted on a number of things that we wanted to do that I wanted to do, but that was the way it was. Nobody had any rank in that whole deal. So that was number one. Number two, the leaders of those 9 committees were totally empowered to do what they wanted to do within the structure of what their topic was. And this was funny. And so this is a really cool learning. Like we had communication, we had culture and company wellness, quality of life is what we called it, quality of life. And so a lot of the people had never been empowered before, right? Before I got there, it was a very top down, do this and do it this way. And that's never been my style, but they didn't know how to do that. And so like we have this meeting, we divvy up the 9 focuses. And like the next day I had 9 people in line at my door saying, okay, Mark, what do we do? Like, what do you want us to do? I go, I don't know. They're like, what do you mean? Like company culture, Mark, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to do? I go, I don't know. I want it to be excellent. They're like, well, what does that mean? I go, I don't know. I want it to be excellent. And they're like, you're crazy. I'm like, no, I don't know. You need to figure out what that looks like. And you are empowered to do that. And so that's why, right? I mean, like they could go back to their folks and they probably said, this Mark dude is crazy, but he's letting me do this. So jump on board. And so they literally had the empowerment to do what they needed to do as long as it was going to create excellence in whatever their initiative was.
Yeah, and then people felt like they had a voice, right? Which is awesome. Like that's people just want to feel cared for and that they matter. And so that meant that they mattered and they could make an impact because there might be a very few people out there who go to work just to collect a paycheck. But even those people who say that, I would gather to say if you really ask them 5 more questions or why, 5 more times, it's more than just the paycheck
Yeah.
because there's lots of options of where to go.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. And the quality of life initiative was super powerful. So what we found was historically we had this, it was a wellness initiative, right? And I think you could get generally directionally correct, $800 a quarter per person reimbursed, but it was very health based focus. So, if you went to a gym and you had a gym membership, that's great, but you had to go out of your way to show the receipt that you paid for it and that you attended. And like it was very onerous. So, literally, we had less than 10% of our employee base that was participating because it was just a pain in the ass to do it and to get reimbursed. So the leader of that initiative was my chief of staff, and she came in and she goes, "Okay, Mark," and she had again this elaborate thing, and it was all based on wellness and fitness and all this kind of stuff and how you're going to do it. I go, Tiffany, I go, let me ask you, what improves your quality of life? And we specifically named it quality of life. What improves your quality of life? She goes, "Oh, I'm a runner." I go, "Cool." I go, "I'm not a runner. Like running to me is hell. Like that is not going to improve my quality of life." And I go, I like to play golf, right? I go, why couldn't we have, some reimbursement for golf or playing golf or whatever? She's like, well, how are we going to monitor that? I go, why do we care about monitoring it? And she's like, what do you mean? And so remember, we're in banking too. So people are always black and white and compliance and whatever. I go, what if we change this thing to quality of life and you can basically be reimbursed for anything? No, not alcohol, not drugs, but basically anything that you said improved your quality of life. And she's like, I don't even know what that means, but I like it. And so we literally like, you could turn in, fishing supplies and you wrote a 3-sentence thing that said, this improved my quality of life because I got out I was in a boat and water is great, whatever. My favorite one of all time was a guy bought a new weed eater and he got reimbursed for the weed eater. And his rationale for why it improved his quality of life is his old weed eater was so bad that he cussed so much every time that he used it that he got a new weed eater and he doesn't cuss anymore when he's doing it. We're like, that's awesome. There were some skeptics that are like, Mark, we're going to get cheated out. I'm like, and we did the math and it was like point, 0.04% of our total expenditure if 100% of our employees used it and they cheated it. Like it wasn't a material dollar amount, but we had 97% participate. We went from under 10% to 97% participation in this. And again, you talk about company morale and creating a vibe. We were on it, man. It was one of the most incredible initiatives we've ever done.
I really like the term quality of life because that means something different to everybody. It's like why I choose the word vibe versus culture because I just feel culture creates there's things that come along with it, good and bad, right? But vibe is like everyone can define it. Everyone has like for the most part understands what like positive and negative and would probably agree on what positive and negative vibes look like. And quality of life's kind of the same thing. Like we all want a good quality of life. Nobody wants to say like I want a bad quality of life, but when it comes to wellness, people probably think like going to the gym, working out, being on a diet, whatever like preconceived notions they have and they're like, "But that okay, cool, like I'll get money for that, but like what if I want to like you said, go fish? Like my son loves to fish." Or go, yeah, you mowing your lawn or we whatever.
Taking a cooking class, all these things, right? Like,
Yeah, which somebody wouldn't put in the bucket of wellness per se, but it's their type of wellness that creates the quality of life that they're looking for. I just that is and simple, but like, why didn't I think of that?
right. Right. Yeah. And you can try to make it more difficult, but we didn't. It was totally simple. And, some people needed help with paying their electric bill. Right. And so we kept it confidential. But I mean, you think about not having to worry about paying your electric bill when that's been on your mind.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Your quality of life's going down if you can't pay your electric bill. Right. So,
totally. Yeah. But it means something different to like all levels. And then you probably started to understand, I mean, there's like this like secondary or tertiary like understanding behind it, you start to understand like what people enjoy. And I don't know if you did anything with that information or not, but that's also, really important in like knowing your people.
yeah, for sure. And it just kept building upon itself and it's good and bad. We didn't get to finish it all out because we got bought. We
Oh,
sold and we sold for an 800% increase in stock value from the day I took it over to the day we sold it.
wow.
So it
Wow.
dropped to the bottom line. Like if you want an ROI on vibe and culture, I can lay it out for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so let's fast forward. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk about what you're up to now. So you leave banking, right? And you're like, I'm good. I've made an impact. I hung up the tie. Sounds like you married off one of your kids. Like, I'm good. And then enters the picture of this like lifestyle company that has turned into way more than that. But talk to me about like what you're doing now that you've taken all these years of experience in creating organizations and yeah, how that's translated to today.
Yeah, in October of 21, I launched a company called Quade. And Quade is a community of CEOs and business owners that come together to challenge each other, to hold each other accountable, and to share expertises and experiences. And the idea for Quade is not new. I joined a CEO peer group when I got my first president role in 2007, so 18 years ago. And it changed my life. And it changed my life because I was in a forum of 10 other CEOs, and we could talk about anything that was going on in our lives. We could talk about business. We could talk about personal challenges. We could talk about opportunities that were out there. And they understood. We were in a group that understood because only a CEO or a business owner knows what another CEO or business owner is going through. If you've never been in that seat, you don't know it. You don't understand it. It is incomprehensible the things that go through somebody's mind at 2 a.m. every single night. And you're rolling over, you're writing something on the notepad beside your bed. And so that's the thought of this. So Quade is built for small to medium sized CEOs and business owners. It gives them a space where they can talk to others that are in that. They can share challenges, they can share opportunities, they can be challenged and pushed and held accountable like you've never been able to do that before, because nobody else in your organization is going to do that. And we're changing lives. And so we joke because it was supposed to be a lifestyle business. I was going to have a couple of circles, and it was going to keep me busy for, however long I want to work and all that. And we kept getting referrals, and we kept growing. And so now, I don't know, we've got 60-ish people. We're going to have 100 by June 30th. We'll have 200 by the end of the year. That, like, we're doing some amazing things, and we built this incredible community that are leaning on each other, that are holding each other accountable and pushing each other. And yeah, it's really powerful. And I'm really proud of the people that we have in it, and how we're growing and pushing them, and just seeing the impact that we're having on people's lives is really awesome.
Yeah, and I think you shared with me, which I think is important to note, that like the forum group that you were in, there are certain criteria, barriers to entry, right? But when you created Quade, you said, well, why does there have to be that barrier to entry? Because there's really, really smart, determined, outstanding CEOs who just haven't hit that mark yet. But that doesn't mean that they're any less than these people, right? One isn't better or worse. So I think you've created some values that Quade stands for. Maybe you can share those.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So, like, people all the time say, "Well, what do I have to do to qualify for Quaid?" And I'm like, "Well, you've got to be a CEO, and you've got to be driven." And they're like, "What do you what does that mean, Mark?" Like, I want people that want to grow, that want to scale, that want to do the right things, that want to invest in their people, that are willing to be vulnerable, that are willing to hold and be held accountable. Like, those are the people that I want to hang out with, right? That are growth minded, that are abundance minded, that know that there is so much out there that we could take advantage of. And if I listen to the people that I'm surrounded with, I can do more for me, for my family, for my company, for my community, all these things. And so there's really not a criteria like really, I won. Don't be an asshole. Like, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
I
want to hang
like
out with
that.
jerks. And so why would we put somebody like that in some of our circles? So yeah, revenue it's an arbitrary number, right? There are so many brilliant people. And like, if you've started a new company tomorrow and you're doing zero in revenue, but you are brilliant, right? And you're doing so many amazing things. Why would I not want you in a circle of allies? Like,
Right.
they're literal arbitrary numbers. And so who's to say that somebody who does $1 million in revenue is not as good as somebody who does $25 million in revenue? That's bullshit. They have the same complications, they have the same challenges, they have the same opportunities. Like, they're just more zeros. And
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, my sisters, I have identical twin sisters that were born when I was 14. So we have a huge age gap, right? And they have started their own business about 3 years ago now, I think. And it's really interesting. I was talking to one of them yesterday, and she was saying that she went to this social event, and it's incredible to see how many people have self limiting talk, right? And as a founder, CEO, owner, it's so important to not get sucked into that, but so easy to get sucked into it. And yes, we can try to like speak into people positively and turn that around, but it's incredibly important in growing an organization or business, whatever you're doing that you are creating, right? It to be surrounded by people who feed into your soul of like determination and drive, because it's really easy to get sucked into something that's not that.
yeah, for
So
sure.
I would say like these circles are just incredibly important to like stay the course and not be distracted by others who are, for whatever reason. And I'm sure there's good reason that they're in a certain headspace, but to be surrounded by people who are in a similar headspace of like doing amazing things is invaluable.
It is so energizing. Like, literally every time I leave a meeting that either I'm still in my own CEO peer group, or one that I'm moderating, like, it is the best 4 hours of my week. Every time. Yeah, I leave so pumped and so energized to go do something, right? Because everybody else is doing something. You're like, oh my God, I've never thought about that. I need to do that. How do you do that? And then you've got all these answers and you've got this whole expanded community and network that you never had before that you can tap into. And it's awesome. It is so energizing. And yeah, I love it.
And so how do you translate like your energy and your passion into these circles? Cuz obviously you can't be to all these in all these circles all at one time. And so I think sometimes there's even for leaders of an organization, right? And you're a leader of your organization and then there's other people who are leading these groups. Like how do you ensure that that same energy and passion and determination come through in the leaders that are leading these groups?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the reasons, honestly, that I was unsure about how to scale was I didn't know how to replicate myself. Not that I'm anything special, but I know what I wanted to create with Quade and the energy that I wanted to bring and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, how do I replicate me? Which should put fear in everybody else. But what I found was I looked inside my own peer group and I've got two leaders that were former CEOs that have allegedly retired. They're both busier than hell, but allegedly retired. And you watch them and what they've done in their careers leads them to be able to do that. So it's a requirement that our circle directors have been a CEO of a significant company before they can be a director in a Quade circle. So they have that experience. They've led people. They understand when when to push and when to step back and take the brakes off. But that's really important. So they've got to be. I mean, they got to fit my culture, right, and who I am, and understand what we're trying to do. And we've got our training program. We talk about it all the time, and all that. But yeah, so they've had to have been a CEO of a significant company before. So if they've done that, they've had success. They know how to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a big question I think of a lot of leaders is like, how do I replicate myself or business owners, right? How do I replicate myself? Not that you want a bunch of, Christies or Marks running around, 'cause I'm sure there's things that I do that people absolutely despise, but also like there's a rhyme and a reason why you do the things that you do. And you want to make sure that people can get access to that without you having to physically be there all the time. So, yeah.
Yep. Yep, for sure.
And growing and developing people, right? Of in your organization of like, if I could replicate the skills that I have in you and you do it, in your own way, how do you go about doing that? So, yeah, that's really, really cool. So, well, I want to be cautious of time. And so, I always end on if there's one piece of advice that you could give to leaders out there, what would that piece of advice be that they can, a tactic, if you will, that they could go do when they leave listening to this conversation and just simply start doing in order to improve the vibe?
All right, I'm gonna cheat. Can I do two?
Sure.
So first and foremost, and it goes back to unapologetically authentic, right? All that means is you understand who you are and you celebrate that, right? And you can do that through assessments. You can do that with just talking. You can just, again, as you evolve over your life, you learn what you like and what you don't like. And I keep a running tab of things that I like and things that I don't. And when something new happens, I'll write it down. So that self-awareness piece is huge. So that's number one. The second one is listen to understand, not to respond. And I am a big proponent of biting my tongue, right? Like just shut up and listen to what the person in front of you is saying. Because if you do that, you're going to hear things that they are not saying in their words, right? Like they're not saying out loud. And that's going to set you up to build a really good rapport with that person. They're going to respect the fact that you're paying attention to them, that you're listening to their words. And frankly, if you're in negotiations, you're going to hear what's important to them. You can take advantage of that. So like it's not all altruistic, but if you listen to understand instead of respond, you're going to learn so much. So those are Chrissy, those are two tactics that I think you can start tomorrow. Like literally anybody. It's not rocket science. It's being respectful. It's being true to yourself. Those two things are really important and easy to do.
And even if it feels like very vulnerable to do that with your organization or your team, start with your family at home or a friend that you really trust, right? Like, hey, I'm going to try something new. It's like building a muscle. Like, the more you do it, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Oh, that wasn't so hard. Oh, I learned something about myself that actually was pretty cool. Right. So start small too. These are simple things, but if they feel overwhelmingly big because they're uncomfortable, yeah, start with the people that you know or your Quade circle,
Yeah. No,
right?
that's
Or
exactly right.
whatever
That is
circle
exactly
you're a
right.
part of. Get started somewhere. That's the important part.
Get started somewhere. Well, and I'll tell you, once I learned, listen, understand, and I applied it at home, woof, my family life improved dramatically.
See, so you can quality of life. It's not just at work, but it's at home too.
That's it. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate you taking the time today, sharing your insight, your wisdom of your years of experience. And I'm just excited to kind of watch what Quade does in the workplace because it sounds like you are doing some awesome things. And I look forward to following your journey.
Kristi, this has been awesome. I had so much fun. Thank you for inviting me on. And yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for my conversation with Mark. Remember, vibe, as Mark describes, is that immediate feeling when you walk into a space. And it's no accident. It's a direct reflection of your company's vision and authenticity coming to life. As leaders, we must lead with self-awareness, listening to understand and creating a community of support. That's how we transform workplaces and how small shifts can lead to big, positive changes. Thanks for joining us today. And until next time, keep vibing, my friends.
If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.